All right, welcome to part 3 of the textbook assignments. Right now we're on response 8 for the strengths-based leadership. And again, this is group 3. All right, the response says, leaders stay true to who they are and then make sure they have the right people around them.
All right. So I'm going to go back to Mervyn Davies out of the Strengths-Based Leadership book. Again, he was the CEO of the Standard Chartered Bank. And what he did was make sure that he knew what his strengths were, and then he felt it was very important to go out and create his leadership team based on strengths that he was lacking in. And as a result, he was able to go above and beyond what his vision actually was and stay on top of the banking market during an economically critical time.
Okay, in looking at this, number 8, so those who surround themselves with similar personalities will always be at a disadvantage in the long run to those who secure enough in themselves to enlist partners with complementary strength. So if you surround yourself with same personality, you will always be at a disadvantage, in other words. So you should bear out to enlist partner with complementary strength.
That's right. When I went back to the strengths-based leadership and went back to the strong teams, and basically strong teams have in common a common conflict. It doesn't destroy the team. So if you have a problem, you're able to have a dialogue and you don't get your feelings hurt. You don't say bad things about somebody else's relatives or mom or something like that. It basically it's a productive conflict. The strong team prioritizes what's best and then moves forward. They are committed to their personal lives, and I think that's a big one too, because if your personal life is out of check when it comes to the amount of time that you spend with them and the amount of time you give them, then it can lead to problems within your team itself. They embrace diversity, and they're magnets for talent. So when you talk about embrace diversity, it goes back to putting that team around you. Do you want a bunch of like-minded people around you to basically, you make a decision and everybody agrees with it, right? Because they all want to be like you. They all think you're a great leader. Or do you have that diversity to where, let's think of it from this point of view, or let's think of it from this point of view to where, you like that, but this group of people may not because they come from this background or they come from this point of view. So, and it reminded me of Wendy Kopp from the Teaching of America. She wanted a strong team to start off with. So the first thing she had to do, after she, raising all that money, she had to get people to go in there and find people that had the raising money strength. To get people to help her do that, to be able to find a great leadership team to where she could put the right people in charge of certain things, where she could look at the big overall picture, while everybody else kind of played their part in the Teach for America campaign.
And just thinking about all that, I have to go back to Anderson because, he knew who he was. He already knew. If you think about how he started out with school, he wasn't really interested in anything doing primary school, grade school, under there. It wasn't until he got to college where he could study exactly what he wanted to study. right there. He already knew who he was, what he wanted to pursue, and that's when he found the success. And he brought in all of these experts that he knew would help build him up. They wouldn't change him. Yes, they would challenge his thinking, but he knew what the vision was, what his purpose was. And although they did come with great questions and all this, he knew who he was, what he was about, what he was looking forward to doing, and that's how he was able to be so successful. He did not use anything conventional. He was that risk taker and had a group surrounded with him who was able to take those risks with him, but they were still knowledgeable in their areas. They were just confident and went forth.
Very nice. All right. Last one, response 9. The most effective leaders also get people to follow.
All right. They say that managers are the ones who develop what needs to be done in an organization. Leaders are the ones who actually make that happen. And I think in order for them to actually make a vision happen and to achieve that vision, they have to have the ability to have others buy into the situation and follow. Just like Matthew said earlier about politicians, well, if they want to be a leader, they have to get all those people behind them to buy into what they're doing and to fund what they're doing so that they'll follow them and vote for them and put them in position. Leaders in schools and businesses are the same way. If they come up with a concept, but they can't get anyone to jump on board and go with them and follow along with what they want to do, then they're not going to be a successful leader at all. And it goes back to the vision into performance model again, where you start off with this vision up here on the left side, but if you don't have a leader who can carry out the actual vision as a process through the entire company, then you never get down to the actual performance or application level.
Okay, well, that's looked at number 9. I went back and looked at the Gallup poll, and it said that effective leaders get people to follow. Followers are looking for the most influential leaders in their lives. They're looking for trust, compassion, stability, hope, and honesty and respect from their leaders.
Yeah, I thought that the interesting quote was about the most influential leaders of our time were like Hitler and Stalin, and I was like, wow. But then it was like, if that's leadership, then I don't want to have any part of it. So, but I go back to that same idea. You're only a leader if people follow you, and I think that as an administrator, you feel like, well, people have to follow me because that's their job, right? I tell them to do something, they do it, or it's insubordination. That's how that works. But there's a difference between people following you because they believe in you compared to a difference of following you because that's what they have to do. And all this leadership talks about is, if people are doing it because they believe in you, they follow you, they're going to be doing a better job compared to, just doing it because they have to. So they're not going to give their best effort or input into that also.
My thoughts are going back to what Mary had said. The most effective leaders, or what causes people to leave, are the relationships that they have. And those relationships have to be built on trust, respect, and integrity. And, that is not something that you can buy. That's something that has to be built amongst the people that you're working with. And when people feel they can trust you or that you respect them, then they are more likely to follow you when compared to someone who they feel does not have the mutual trust and respect for them.
All right. Anything else about responses or anything like to add? Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is basically just talk about one chapter at a time. And if there's any lessons that you've learned that are outside of what we kind of already talked about in the responses themselves, we can talk about that. We can use the same order if you like to, or just jump in if you feel passionate about something. Okay. So we'll start off with chapter 4, from the management of organizational behavior.
I think, like we said a while ago, it pretty well went hand in hand with what we read in Strengths and Leadership and what we've been reading all along in class. It just went a little more in depth into different models that they have set up for leadership.
Right.
I guess the most.
Go ahead, Carla.
Okay, I think the most that I got from this, and I think I talked about it previously when we were discussing one of the questions from strength-based leadership, is about the employee-centered environment and the job-centered environment. We often, so much as teachers, we hear those same terms, the child-centered environment and then the teacher-centered environment. And I really have never looked at it through the lens of an administrator and wanting to make sure that I create or that I work in an environment that is really employee-centered and making sure that, all of the employees feel like they are a genuine part, that it's about them growing and learning and helping and us working together to reach the goals and the demands that are put on us by the district, the state, and whoever. So that was really reading about those management systems by Leica was just really something that I said I'm going to think on as I make that path toward being an administrator, making sure that they see it's not all about the pressure that's put on me. It's about us working together to be successful.
Well, what caught my attention in chapter 4 was the empirical study. And they said the empirical study, it shows that there is no best style of leadership. Effective leaders adapt their leaders' behavior to meet the needs of their followers. And a particular environment, if their followers are different, they must be treated differently. In other words, effectiveness depends on the leaders and followers.
Yeah, that's what caught my eye too, is that, we're learning about these leadership styles, and, there is no real one that works the best. So, I think like anything, you kind of try to address your weaknesses, but we've also been told from strengths bases that, you want to really key on those strengths rather than looking at the weaknesses, because if you try to learn something every day, which is a good thing, you also you may not use your strengths to your strengths for what they are. You might not be able to work on situations because you might try to, hey, I'm going to try using one of my weaknesses here that I've been practicing on, and the end result doesn't come out the way you want it to, right? But the other thing I found pretty interesting in chapter 4 was the negative leadership traits and behaviors.
Yes.
Really interesting. Where, it said,
It just validated my beliefs all along.
Right, exactly.
Right.
The perception of being uninformed or being non-participants or being extremely rigid. Why were these traits so critical? And basically, these are things that you don't want to be. And the most frequent cause of derailment was insensitive to others, but the most serious was untrustworthiness. So you think of yourself as a person first, right? Everybody has bad days, but you go into a meeting or a post conference or whatever, and and you think to yourself, well, I just kind of blew that person off, and I didn't give them my best advice, or didn't help them in any way. And you're like, man, that one exchange could be basically the one thing they base our relationship off of. And if that's your initial one, then you've got a lot of things to kind of turn around. So it makes you more aware of how important positive interactions are with your teachers. Now, can you be nice and still get your point across? Yeah, you can. If it's a point where you have to, kind of give them some negative feedback from some things that have happened, it's tough to do that. But if you only have 1 or 2 interactions with a teacher a day, and one of those is negative, it can cause a real problem.
Yeah.
All right.
I just like that they use the term fatal flaws right before that.
That was, yes. All right. Anything in chapter 6 that you guys want to bring to light that you found interesting?
Chapter 6?
Yes. I'll say that the one thing that before I have the job I do now, I worked as a 6th grade math teacher, and we had a lot of problems with our buses. So the administration would always come to me and ask me to drive a bus, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. That's fine. Can you find somebody else? Well, no, we can't. Well, yeah, I'll do it. And I always had the idea, I said, it really, management only wants, and administration really, not management, administration just wants the job done. And then I read this quote of a basic responsibility of manager in any type of organization is to get work done. And I was like, well, I hope it's really not like that, but that's exactly what it says. So, you want to make sure that as an administrator, you get work done, but you do it through building relationships rather than someone feeling bad about not getting a job done and not wanting somebody else to have to do it.
But in chapter 6, I looked at what Fred Lutheran, the professor of management at the University of Nebraska, when he conducted his 4-year observational study to determine the similarities and difference between successful managers and those who were rapidly promoted, and effective managers, those who were satisfied, committed employees. And during the study, less than 10% of the managers in the study simply were in both the top third of successful manager and the top third of effective managers. So his study concluded that more attention needs to be paid at designing a system to reward and support effective organizations, and that will increase the ability to compete and excel in a rapid changing market and environment conditions.
Okay. I also liked the section under organizational dilemma, and it can be a scene so many times in the schools where we bring in, or they bring in, because we don't bring them in yet, administrators, and they may be there 6 months, they may be there a year, and we've moved them on somewhere else. And the fact that you are constantly changing the leadership kind of destroys your chance for success, or for a successful organization, because they're just there for the short term, and like Matthew said, to get the job done while they're there, and then they move on, and so whatever was left over is not taken care of. So instead of actually spending time and growing leaders, they're just kind of running through what they have and then pushing them on up to the next pay grade.
And it could be that car salesman that, gets all these problems fixed for the moment, but they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And then all of a sudden when they leave, the situation's worse than when it started. And then you're in that position where you have to say, oh, by the way, we've got to fix this. And well, I liked it how the other guy did it. Why don't we get him back? And basically you're having to fix problems that somebody else created.
Right.
That's true, and we've been experiencing that in our county. I believe I told y'all that we had a new superintendent start this fall. Our superintendent before had absolutely no background in education. He was just a great lawyer. So he was hired to be our superintendent, and yes, he implemented a lot of good programs. Our high school dropout rate decreased, and all of that. But all of those other things like teacher pay, teacher morale, all of that other stuff, sort of got pushed over to the left, the far left. So now we have this new superintendent who, she has a list of accolades and awards and all of that. But, our county, Guilford County, has a serious rep. If you're like, no, don't want to work in Guilford County, we'll go somewhere else. We'll even take the lower pay in some of the other counties just so that, they don't have to come to Guilford County. And now the superintendent, she's trying to come behind this old system that we have and clean up, and try to put us back on track, which I wish her the best. But we are just facing this big dilemma right now, even looking at human resources and all of the jobs that are still open right now. And here it is going into March. And we have all these various openings. Something else I thought about, what I looked into when I was reading this book, was about there was some factory and they were discussing some changes in technology, and it discussed how when they asked for the input of the staff, that the resistance to changing and using the technology or whatever was much easier when compared to the other organizations who did not ask for any input of their staff. And this goes back to what we had discussed several times about the importance of collaboration and input and feedback from your staff, because all in all, everyone wants to be a part of their job. They want to feel like they are of value, and that they do have, I guess, somewhat of an expertise, or they have leadership skills as well. So I thought that was very important. And going back to making sure that you have that employee-centered environment where everyone feels they are valued.
All right. Chapter 11, the self-awareness and leadership style. I think that, looking more in depth to that Johari window thing about you can change how the square works, right? How you're able to get more information out about yourself or about others, and about what you know about them and what they know about you. I think what's cool is, we're teaching in a pretty great time when it comes to technology, and as a principal, assistant principal, whatever you want to say, you want to get real feedback from your staff. So you have great ways of doing, surveys and things like that allow you to get real feedback. And schools are always trying to get feedback from their parents, from their teachers, and the students to see what they need to work on. And I think we are in a really exciting time to be able to do that. When before you would have that face-to-face conversation, what can I do for you as a principal to the teacher? Is there anything that I'm doing wrong? Is there anything I need to improve upon? And at that moment, you're like, do I want to keep my job, or do I want to find a new place to work? So the feedback itself is not always authentic, and I think that's the easy thing now is that one of the things that some of our principals do do in our county is they'll give like a Google survey at the end of the year where you fill out these questions, and you can take the data and do what you want to with it, I guess. So you're able to get feedback in a way that you won't lose your job. Or even the teacher working condition survey is, the superintendent looks at that and looks at the principal and the school and see how things are going. So teachers are pretty empowered to be able to give their thoughts and ideas about how the principal's doing, about how the administrative team is doing, in order to to see what kind of adjustments need to be made. See if there's a misconception, like I said, if I'm doing a good job communicating or not. If it says that I have like a 25% approval rating of communicating with the staff, and I think I've got 100%, then there's a big disconnect there. So those are the things you can work on and evaluate yourself.
Yeah. And it also talked about your willingness to change.
Right.
That what your styles are, but you have to be willing to change. And it brought up the reflecting part again, where you might feel guilty after studying all these leadership styles and go, oh, wow, gosh, I failed in this area. And they compared it using the story with the parents and the child who had gotten into drugs and such. And
right.
They said, is it too late to change? And of course it said, no, it's not too late to change, but you have to be careful. Even if you're willing to change your style, you have to be willing to think about how you're going to change it, so that you don't, like with the boy, if you give him too much attention and start coddling him after all this time, he's not going to respond positively. He's going to be very resentful and have a negative reaction to it. And I think that when you look at the teacher working conditions surveys, and then it goes to the school improvement team, and maybe you were lacking in a leadership area that you thought you were not lacking in, that you have to be willing to change, but you have to be willing to also sit back and figure out what style is going to be effective when you do make that change.
And it also talks about self-awareness, and that to be the cornerstone of developing yourself as a leader. And leaders need to look inward and recognize their thoughts and feelings and evaluate their choices and the impact of their behaviors.
And Leigh, that was the same. That is one of the things that stood out to me the most was, is it too late? This question has actually come up in our PLCs, the ones that was missing our principal. We were some of the teachers were talking about her leadership style, one that's controlling, and she micromanages and this and that, and so the question came up, well, she came and apologized, because here again it appears that it's going to be another year for high turnover. So if she were to come back and apologize for some of her actions, would we change? What would we say? Or, because we have to think about the children, how's it affecting them when every year everyone is new? That changes the climate of the school each year. And several teachers said no. So when I read this in the book, I was thinking, obviously it's too late for her, but at what point do at what point internally do okay, I have crossed the line? It's been 5 years of excessive turnovers, or it's been years and my scores are starting to decline, or whatever the case may be. At what point do I know, okay, as administrator, I have messed up and I need to change, and what do I have to do to change? And am I willing to put forth the effort to change? Because a lot of times we'll start out saying, I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z, and then come October, I'm back to doing X, Y, Z, and going back to A as well. So that really stood out, because the text said, yeah, managers, we can change. Anyone, any behavior can be changed, whether, going back to the example in the book, or going back being effective managers or leaders, you can change. But we have to think about what effects it has on the staff in the midst of our transition.
All right. Last chapter, chapter 12 about effective communication. I think one thing that's nice about now is that there's so many different forms of communication. And, you know, when we look at some pretty interesting things about how things communicate, you know, all schools communicate in different ways, okay? And, you know, at a school I was at before, didn't have a hierarchy of communication where, you know, the principal would tell the assistant principals, and then they would tell the, you know, the teacher in charge of the grade level, and that teacher in charge of the grade level would tell individually the teachers on that grade level. You know, and other times at the school I was before, that they would, you know, have a big whole grade level meeting with the principal, the assistant principals, all the teachers. So the people that, you know, didn't need the information at the time still got it. So they always felt like it was kind of a waste of time that they had to learn about, you know, what we need to do in math when the principal just needed to tell the head math teachers, or they could tell the people in their group. So communication can save a lot of time, save a lot of heartache, and knowing that those followers that you have are going to do their job and communicate with the people that they need to tell can save a lot of time in the long run.
Yeah. Looking at that in the book, as far as communication patterns, that said, is there a best communication pattern?
Right.
And I mean, I think it's based on just what your organization does well with. I don't know how many times we say at our school, could you not have just sent that out in the email? It just made it one big, giant open communication. They had the star formation, which had like the principal would have been in the center. And so you had everybody just reporting back to that center person, and no one else was communicating in their star formation. And then they had the circle formation where, like you said, there's an open line where everybody is allowed to talk to everyone. And I think that if you have the circle of communication rather than the star, where you have that one, the principal in the center controlling who speaks to whom about what, you have more trust, which goes back to what they were talking about being an effective leader, that you have to build that trust with your employees. Because, I mean, bottom line, we're humans. And if they're not allowing everyone to communicate and somebody feels like they're in the dark, then that's just going to cause a problem among your staff members.
True.
Okay, in chapter 12, I learned about how important it is to be able to communicate not only orally but written, and how important it is for not only in getting the job but in performing your job. So as leaders and administrators, we have to be able to communicate orally and written. And then we have to also build personal power for our staff.
Okay. And after reading this chapter, what stood out, I guess, the most to me, in order to effectively communicate, you know, we have to think about, we have to really know our staff. And of course, you know, in this type of setting, you're not going to make everyone happy. I, for one, cannot stand a lot of emails. It works me. You know, you have these emails that put you in the mind of this book, this management book. That's how long the email is. And you're asking me, well, Mr. Can you get the email? Yeah, no. And, you know, that's just me, but that doesn't mean that, okay, Matthew may find it easier to read that email than to have to sit in a staff meeting knowing that he teaches ALA, but he has to sit in this meeting to discuss the latest math strategy. So I think you have to really, you know your staff. It could be as easy as doing a survey. You know, what is the most effective or what's the most efficient method or model communication for you and sort of go with that. Again, not everyone's going to be happy. It might be 50-50, then you're really going to be in a mess. But that, you know, that really stood out for me because I think that, you know, I consider my time valuable, and I guess I'm one of those that's hard to please. I really don't like sitting in long staff meetings when they're talking about something that has nothing to do with me. But then again, I don't want it in the email, so I'm not going to look at the PowerPoint because it has nothing to do with me. But, you know, you just have to, as an administrator, you have to really ask and, again, accept that feedback, you know, what is going to be the most effective way, and then actually actively listen to your staff when they are giving you feedbacks. You know, a lot of times we have it in our head, well, I already know I'm going to just send out the emails anyway, regardless of whether they want to read emails or not. So you're listening to them, but you hear them, but they're not really saying anything to you because you already have your mind made up. And that's really what I gathered the most from reading over this chapter. Well, yeah.
All right. Well, that concludes the textbook assignment.
Yay!